stories of our successes are manipulated in such a way that even as we enjoy watching or seeing representation of ourselves on television or in the movie theater, my brothers and sisters, that enjoyment is so often coupled with just a tinge of regret or disbelief or being upset at the way that the story is used to contribute to a misleading narrative about who we are. And it would be one thing, my brothers and sisters, if these stories were mistold out of ignorance or out of a lack of understanding. It would be one thing if these were just stories that were told because people did not see us fully or understand who we are. It would be one thing if these stories were just the result of a lack of exposure. Then, my brothers and sisters, we could believe that having diversity seminars or cultural awareness or exposing people to blackness and black culture, we could imagine that these activities would be sufficient to address the crisis that we experience. It would be sufficient to reduce the amount of angst that happens in everyday American life. We could believe that, my brothers and sisters, if it were simply a matter of ignorance. But I do not believe that what we are dealing with is a matter of ignorance, my brothers and sisters. I believe that what we are dealing with is the intentional manipulation of stories to reinforce a broader narrative to support the idea that racism is fundamentally okay. That the stories are told in such a way to help people feel justified in their racism and to help to encourage black people to feel inferior so that we do not have the emotional or spiritual power to stand up against the various forms of oppression that we encounter on a day-to-day basis. These stories are not told accidentally, my brothers and sisters. They are intentionally manipulated in ways to try to increase the ability of powerful people to hold on to their power and to make it harder for the rest of us to claim that which is rightfully ours. That these stories are mistold intentionally, my brothers and sisters, that this is no accident. And this is one of the reasons, my brothers and sisters, why I believe it is important for us to come to church every once in a while. Because in the church, my brothers and sisters, if we are doing this church thing right, if we are really in touch with the Spirit of God and listening to the voice of God as God is moving and speaking in these days and times, if we are really in touch with the work that God is doing in the world, my brothers and sisters, that when we come to the church, we ought to hear a message that reminds us that if nobody else in the world sees us as we are, if nobody else in the world understands our experiences or our existence, if nobody else in the world is in touch with the deep angst that happens, even if it's only in the recesses of our minds, my brothers and sisters, that God sees us fully as we are, that God sees us completely as we are, and that not only does God see us as we are, but God loves us as we are, my brothers and sisters. I want you to know, even if you don't get anything else out of the message, I want you to know when you leave here, my brothers and sisters, that you don't leave here invisible, that you don't leave here unknown, that you are not leaving here unloved, but know if nobody else sees you, and if nobody else knows you, and if nobody else loves you, that the God who sits high and still looks low, that the God who created the heavens and the earth, that the God who causes the sun to rise in the morning and set in the evening, the God that keeps the sun, moon, and stars in their place and holds the whole world in God's hands, that same God sees you and loves you just as you are. My brothers and sisters, we ought to be lifting up this message and reminding ourselves and reminding one another that God sees us and God loves us, my brothers and sisters. And the fact is that we are, there are so many people out in the world. There are so many people out in the community. There are people who are out on the streets around this church who are living in an existence where they are not sure that God sees them and God loves them, and they need you to let them know, to remind them, to tell them, my brothers and sisters, that they are seen and they are loved by God. Yes. One of the ways, my brothers and sisters, that we do this, that we acknowledge and celebrate God's sight and God's love for us is in our ability to authentically tell stories that others misunderstand or misinterpret. And that is why this parable series is so important to me, my brothers and sisters. Yes, it's important to me that you have a better understanding of what's happening in the Bible. And yes, it's important to me that you have a deeper understanding of what Jesus is saying in these parables. But more importantly than that, it is important to me that we develop the habit of being able to see more clearly, that we are able to see better the way that power can misinterpret stories, so that when our stories are being mistold or misinterpreted, that we have the ability to look through the deception, that we have the ability to look through the manipulation, that we can have a sense of being able to recover the genuine and original story, because we see this in the biblical text, and we can apply that same tool, that same principle to our everyday lives. My brothers and sisters, that's why this sermon series is important to me. So last week, as we looked at this parable, we talked about the fact that this parable exists not in a vacuum, but in a larger system of an economic and political structure in which, to phrase it very plainly, gentrification is happening in this neighborhood, that this vineyard that is planted in this environment, my brothers and sisters, in this relatively urban environment in this text is being planted not in space that is unused. This is not vacant land that is being bought, my brothers and sisters, but this is the land that belongs to people, that people believed was given to them by God as an inheritance, my brothers and sisters, to be passed along from generation to generation, that they believed that everybody had a right to live somewhere, and that nobody was meant to be homeless, that God did not intend anybody to be without land, without a place to live, without a place to call their own, that nobody was meant to be a wanderer, nobody was meant to be a stranger in their own land, my brothers and sisters. And so, but what happened is that as rich people and powerful people began to make compromise with the Roman Empire, they forgot the rules of their society that God had dictated and ordained for them to live by, which made it not only possible, but made it a legal requirement backed by a moral declaration, my brothers and sisters, that the land should always return to the original holder, no matter how much in debt they got. My brothers and sisters, that there was a time when all land was supposed to go back. So no matter how much you were in debt, or no matter when the bank foreclosed upon your land, or no matter how many times the land changed from one person to another to satisfy various debts, that there was a particular year, my brothers and sisters, that came around at least once in every generation, that was supposed to erase all the debts and set everybody back to zero, my brothers and sisters, so that everybody had a chance to live the life that God ordained, that nobody was forced to experience generational poverty year after year, generation after generation, my brothers and sisters, that everybody had a chance to live the life that God ordained people to live. This was the basis of their economic system, but that became a challenge, trouble, compromise, my brothers and sisters, when people made a deal with the Romans in order to just carve off a piece of their existence. They made a deal in order to survive what they believed and perceived to be immediate annihilation, but that deal, that compromise, came with a cost. And so people forgot about setting aside their economic debts, and people began to become in debt permanently, my brothers and sisters. And so this vineyard that was created in this text was created as a result of one wealthy landowner, rather by good fortune or luck, rather by making the strategic deal with an oppressor, rather by just taking advantage of the misfortune of his or her neighbors, that one wealthy landowner was able to amass enough properties around and have enough spare income to build a vineyard. And in doing so, employed most likely the people whose land it actually belonged to work in their vineyard, my brothers and sisters. This is an example. This is the story of economic gentrification that is happening right there, of every brewery that is popping up in neighborhoods that were once populated, especially by poor black people, that all of these restaurants and entertainment venues, the soccer stadiums, everything that is rising up, that has taken advantage of land that has been disinvested in, my brothers and sisters, for generations, and now the land has been devalued such that people with wealth and means are able to take advantage of low prices to amass large swaths of land and then to use those for their entertainment and the entertainment of others, while displacing people who have lived there and raised their families there, while completely tearing apart the character of a neighborhood. This is what is happening here in this parable, my brothers and sisters. And in the midst of this, with Jesus, the reason Jesus is telling this parable is to call out this act of gentrification, to call out this act of land buying as an act of violence. This is an act of economic violence that Jesus is calling out in the text, my brothers and sisters, because the powers that be would have you to believe, and the reason that this parable has been told and interpreted the way it has been, to place the blame on the workers of the vineyard, my brothers and sisters, is because they want this parable to suit the narrative that this act of violence by the landowners is what is reprehensible. And so every time I've heard this parable taught or preached, every time this parable has been explained to me, even by the most serious biblical scholars, by people who take the Bible very seriously, my brothers and sisters, they have blamed the workers of the vineyard for their act of violence. And they have told this parable something like this: God is the landowner. God is the one who owned the vineyard. That the workers of the vineyard were the Sadducees and the Pharisees that God originally gave the word to. They abused the word, and so God sent the prophets, and they mistreated the prophets. They beat up the prophets. They killed the prophets. Then God sent his only son, Jesus Christ, to them, and then they killed Jesus. And so it was a story about condemning the workers. And in doing so, my brothers and sisters, they also use this as a way of justifying the hatred and violence that people have towards Jewish people. This is the way the story has been told and interpreted to me, my brothers and sisters. And so it was a mind-opening experience. It caused me to have to take a second look at the biblical text once I realized my own complicity with institutional power by reading God as the vineyard owner in this text. That first of all, there is nothing in the text that suggests that God is the vineyard owner. That is an assumption that has been placed on the text to make it line up with a particular worldview. The second thing, my brothers and sisters, is that by placing God as the vineyard owner, then it masks the economic violence that the vineyard owner is perpetuating on the people. We aren't critical then of the vineyard owner. We don't ask the questions, how did the vineyard owner come to acquire the land? We don't assess the political landscape of the situation because we assume if the vineyard owner is God, then everything the vineyard owner does must be right. And so it is a way of hiding the hand of power, my brothers and sisters, in the text. We assume that might makes right in this text. And then we look at the violence of the slaves, the violence of these workers who are working for less than minimum wage, the violence of these abused workers, my brothers and sisters. We look at that and we wag our spiritual fingers and we say, shame on you for this violence. But much like our stories, my brothers and sisters, the stories of these vineyard workers has been mistold, it's been misinterpreted, it's been misunderstood, that they are not enacting violence because they are bleeding people. They are not enacting violence, my brothers and sisters, because they are morally corrupt. They are acting violently because violence has been enacted on them, and they do not know any other way to defend what they are constantly losing other than to use violence as a recourse. This is the violence, my brothers and sisters, of the Revolutionary War. It is the violence that precipitated the Civil War. It is the violence of when one's way of life is so threatened that people do not understand any other way to react but to use violence to defend it, because defending it seems to be the only alternative. My brothers and sisters, it is the violence that if we were to wave it, to wrap it in the red, white, and blue, would be celebrated. But because it is not the violence of empire or the violence of a fledgling country trying to be empire, because it is violence that is enacted against empire, then we condemn it. We call it radical or terrorist. We find other ways of trying to disassociate ourselves from it, to mischaracterize it in such a way that nobody wants to be associated with it, my brothers and sisters. It is what the federal government has done to so many of our heroes in our Black history. That they have sanitized some heroes and held them up and then demonized others and tried to strip them from us, my brothers and sisters. It is what they've done with the men and women who were in the Black Panther Party. Not that the Black Panther Party is beyond critique, my brothers and sisters, but they have been demonized in such a way, or the violence of the Black Panther Party has been elevated in such a way that it is the only story about the Black Panther Party, and very few people realize or acknowledge that many of the social service programs that are a fundamental part of our cities, which are now under attack by this administration, were simply cities' way of adopting Black Panther Party programs. That free breakfast and free lunch that happens in school for people who qualify for it were Black Panther programs that they provided for communities before schools would do this for children, because they realized that the children in their neighborhood were going to school hungry, and they knew that children can't learn if they can't hear beyond the sound of their stomach rumbling, my brothers and sisters. That was the Black Panthers who did that. What is now called WIC, the Women, Infant, and Children program, that was a program that was initiated by the Black Panther Party. And the way that came into the government is that people who were active in the Black Panther Party ran for and won office and took the same programs and used their office to bring them into the government, my brothers and sisters. That this was a use of organized power to take what was happening in the streets and what was working well in the streets and put it in office, my brothers and sisters. But now the government wants to take these programs and use them or disuse them or misuse them or cut funding depending on the political nature of the people in office. And no matter what they do with the programs, they want to ignore the fact that they got this from quote-unquote radical Black people in the street that they tried to kill and prosecute and ignore. It's a way of misinterpreting the stories, my brothers and sisters. The stories of these vineyard workers has been mistold and misinterpreted, my brothers and sisters, that what Jesus is really talking about here is the danger of the spiral of violence. Jesus is saying this story begins with an initial violent act. It's the violent act of the economic oppression of a vineyard owner who buys land. It is followed, my brothers and sisters, as initial violent acts often are, by a reciprocal violent act, a violent act in response to the first one. My brothers and sisters, we understand this because most children on the playground, if you punch them, they will punch you back. This is people learn this. I will defend myself by using the same method you use to attack me. Violence is enacted upon them, and so they respond with violence. Their survival is at stake. The vineyard owner is trying to take the very food off of their table that they need to survive. They only have so much wages that they're getting, and the vineyard owner is trying to take even those wages, my brothers and sisters. And so they have had so much, that they finally push back. And they fight. And unable to get at the vineyard owner, they take it out on the servants that the vineyard owner sends. And this is the way that violence happens in our communities, my brothers and sisters. People talk about this as black on black crime, which is a misnomer because nobody ever talks about white on white crime. But the fact is that violence naturally happens to those in the immediate vicinity of where one lives. In other words, if I am going to be violent, it is unlikely that I'm going to go across town to find people I don't know in a neighborhood I'm unfamiliar with to take out my violent actions or aggressions on them. I am most likely to be violent in the places I'm comfortable with, around the people whom I live. And so it is a natural act. And so no matter the cause of the reason of my violence, no matter what has mentally or psychologically disturbed me that is causing me to feel or act in violent ways, it is hard for me to process that in such a way that allows me to find the target of the real, the angst and the emotions that I'm feeling, and to go direct it in the appropriate way. I'm most likely to act out around whoever is around me. And so what is talked about as black on black crime is really people's physical reaction to the emotional and psychological violence that is enacted by American racism on black people. And rather than going across town to find people to enact the violence against, they just let it spill out on whoever's around. But it just doesn't happen in our communities. White people do this in white communities too, my brothers and sisters. And most recently, as I was learning about stand your ground and preparing to make a defense about stand your ground laws that are being passed in Ohio, somebody dropped on me the bombshell that the largest victim of stand your ground laws are white men. More white men are dying as a result of stand your ground laws than black men or black women, our brothers and sisters, and that's because it's white men who are doing most of the shooting. And so when they are shooting, it is mostly the people around them, it is the white people around them that they are shooting. This is the way that violence perpetuates itself in our society, my brothers and sisters. And so these servants, these slaves in the vineyard are taking their violent actions out upon the closest manifestation to power that they can see. They can't get to the vineyard owner, so they take it out on the slave that is sent to collect the rent payment. So they are engaged in this tussle, my brothers and sisters. And this violent act goes back and forth to the point that the vineyard owner, still unwilling himself to come down and confront the slaves himself, still unwilling to be accountable for the actions that his violence has precipitated, is still hiding behind the cloak of his power. And rather than going himself and dealing with this, he says, I will send my son. Because he would rather sacrifice his son than to come down and deal with the violence that he has caused sisters, that power, that people in power often, that the preservation of their power is so important that they will sacrifice their own children to maintain their power. If you want to know why Donald Jr. was sent to meet with the Russians,
Already know.
it's because then there's a wall of separation. That even if Donald Jr. gets taken off in handcuffs, that Donald Sr. is protected from it. There's a thin veil of power. My brothers and sisters, that people, this is the danger of violence, my brothers and sisters, is that it dehumanizes everyone that is a part of it. And the people who perpetuate it can't even themselves be fully human, not even with their own families, because the preservation of their power is so important. It is a toxic pill that poisons every relationship they have. This man would rather sacrifice his son than to deal with his own issues. And Jesus says they killed the son, thinking this will be an end to the violence. But what happens? The man decides that he's going to level the vineyard and kill everybody. And then try to start over, never being accountable for his own actions. My brothers and sisters, and this is the danger of the violence that takes place. This is what King talked about when King talked about the importance of nonviolence, my brothers and sisters. It was not just that nonviolence was a spiritual principle, but it is also that nonviolence, my brothers, that violence, my brothers and sisters, can so often lead us down into a spiral that it is hard to find our way out of. And that in nonviolence, that when we believe in disciplined nonviolence, active nonviolence, King talked about it as militarized nonviolence. When we use nonviolence as an active weapon to fight for our liberation, my brothers and sisters, that we begin to win our liberation in a way that also helps us to maintain the best of our humanity. It is why, my brothers and sisters, the first sign of Christianity was not a cross, but it was a fish. Because people recognized they had a responsibility to feed one another. Because in taking the time to feed one another, they affirmed that your humanity is worth me taking time to care about. My brothers and sisters, I want to posit to you that the reason Pastor's Anniversary was so great, despite the wonderful preaching of Leslie Jones and despite the wonderful singing of the worship team, the reason why Pastor's Anniversary was so great is because once the service was over and we were finished up here, we had wonderful food downstairs. And part of the reason that the food was so wonderful, my brothers and sisters, is because people spent time to prepare it. That it wasn't, people didn't go to La Rosa's or to Domino's or to Pizza Hut and get something really quick, but somebody spent time over a hot stove to make sure that all the food was prepared in a way that when you ate it, you felt like somebody loved you. And that's why people were taking plates, going home, my brothers and sisters. Because their love was so good, they wanted to take some of that love home with them. There is something about that, the very act of feeding someone that lets you know that somebody loves you enough to prepare food for you. And so when the early church made it an important part of their mission to feed people, it was their way of saying that even if no one else will take care of you, even if the government, which is supposed to care for us, won't do their job, that God is enabling and empowering this radical group of Christians to take whatever resources they can to make sure that you've got something to eat. And so they made sure that they fed one another, my brothers and sisters. It's why, in just a moment, it's why we're cutting service short today to go down to the potluck of the people. Because I believe, my brothers and sisters, that if Jesus came back today, that the people Jesus would say well done to would not be any of the 53 3 churches that are worshiping right now, just in Avondale alone, that the people that Jesus would go to first would not be the crossroads or the vineyards or any of the mega churches that are worshiping around the city or around the country. But that the first place Jesus would stop, if Jesus were to come to Cincinnati, would be right downtown at Piatt Park, where the potluck of the people are happening. And Jesus would be there with the people being fed. And Jesus would say first to them, "Well done, my good and faithful servants." That they are enacting, my brothers and sisters, the mission of Jesus. And if we are going to be the people of God, my brothers and sisters, we have got to find ways to let our worship not just be an experience that we share among ourselves, but something that we live out. That we find ways to connect with people, to affirm their humanity, to say to them, even if the news reports get it wrong, even if your criminal background has it wrong, even if the legal system has it wrong, even if everybody else, even if your academic transcript has it wrong, even if your employment history has it wrong, even if everything that everybody says about you has it wrong, even if Facebook and Twitter have it wrong, that I know a God who has it right, and I'm going to love you the way God has loved me, because I know that when my record was wrong, that God loved me for who I was, and I'm going to share that love with someone else. We have a practice, my brothers and sisters, that we call responsive words, our way of acknowledging that God is not just up speaking through me, because I'm the one in front of you with a microphone, but that God desires to speak to and through each and every one of us.